Take your potato, put it on the grass, take some grass clippings, cover it up, and then let it grow into a massive potato plant. That's what I did 1 year ago to get these beautiful potato plants, and I just did it in a small section, and now this year I've done it in a big way. I have potato plants all the way along this row, along my fence line. And the beautiful thing about potatoes is that they're really good at converting a lawn into a garden system in the first year, because if you cut the grass really short and put a potato down that has a few more eyes than this one, and then you cover it with a nice thick layer of grass clippings, those grass clippings are gonna smother the grass, and I'll show you what that looks like here. See how they're smothering that grass and they're killing it, but the potato itself sends up shoots through really thick layers of mulch, so the potato is not gonna have a problem coming up through this grass. And you may think, is that grass gonna create a really wet, soppy, nasty area? Well, no. If you do a nice layer that's not, a foot thick, it's gonna dry out in the sun, and then you keep adding layers and layers on top of that until your potatoes start to grow, and then when they grow up, they do a really good job of suppressing any potential weeds or additional grass that would try to come up through those grass clippings. Now, since this is my second year of doing this bed has already established and the soil has only increased in fertility. And you can see I'm continuing to mulch at the edge of these potatoes to keep the grass from encroaching into the bed down in there. And I'm covering the long grass, and you can see it's still killing the long grass really well, but if you cut the grass really, really short, it does an even better job here. This year I'm growing 3 types of potatoes. This, a Yukon Gold, which I believe is this plant right here, and then a blue Adirondack, which I think is this darker. It has kind of a blue purple hue to it. On the inside, it's a really cool looking purplish blue potato. And then I'm also growing these red russet potatoes, and I'm not exactly sure which plant that is because I have so many of them. Now, the thing I've done with these potatoes is I've interplanted them with things like this garlic right here, because this does a really good job of repelling pests and disease that would try to attack these potatoes. There's another garlic there, and this is a radish plant. So you can really just throw in things. The radish is going to seed, but that's going to produce some beautiful flowers. And then down below here, I even have some low-growing strawberries. Look, there's a strawberry starting to ripen right there. That's a good low-growing ground cover. So if you get the right mix of plants in here, you don't have to put just potatoes. You can really jam-pack plants in here. Now, last year in this bed, I grew corn, and these are the dried corn stalks. And I did an experiment to grow these sweet sugar snap peas up the corn stalks, and it's going really well. I have some growing all the way up this stalk, and then I have more on these other stalks of corn. Now, this is a really great use of the vertical space that goes above where the potatoes would grow to, that makes use of all the light, and they're capturing that light and converting it and creating these beautiful little sugar snap peas. Among these potatoes, I've also added some flowers. Here's one of them. This is a salvia type flower variety that the bees absolutely love. It has all these little blooms that they just flock to. These are all the potatoes all along this line here, and then in the back I've planted Jerusalem artichokes, which they grow up really tall, almost like a sunflower. They produce a big flower at the top, and below the soil they actually create a tuber that is edible and tastes kind of similar to an artichoke and a potato, I've heard, but we'll see how exactly those taste when it comes time to harvest. So first year, like I said, I did put a potato on the grass just like that, and I covered it with grass clippings. This year, since I had a really good established bed and there was some nice soil in there, I did bury them just a little bit and then continue to cover with grass clippings, but now I don't have to cover as much because all of the grass clippings decomposed in this bed a year ago, and it created some really nice, beautiful soil. Here's a look at some of that soil. You can see there's still some grass clippings in there that are starting to decompose, but it's really looking great. Now, when it comes time to harvest these potatoes, and the reason why they're called no-dig potatoes is it should be a relatively easy process without having to dig deep into the ground to uncover these potatoes. And that really was the case the first year. It's really just a matter of moving apart the grass clippings to uncover potatoes under, the deep layers of the grass clippings that you've put here. And I liked this method with the grass clippings a lot better than in the wood chips that I tried, because it was really easy to uncover them and move apart the grass clippings versus digging through the heavier and sharper edges of the wood chips. This is the area last year where I put potatoes, and I have a lot of other plants in here this year. I'm not planning to put potatoes, but every year you grow potatoes, you're probably gonna miss some and they'll continue to come up. So here's one here, and I know there's another one over here as well. There's a few others that are coming up throughout this bed, and that's okay. I'll just get a few extra potatoes. But the reason why I don't love doing the no-dig potatoes and wood chips is, look, digging through this, the wood chips tend to just fall in the hole you're digging, and then they mix with the soil down below, which I don't really want. I want the wood chips to stay on top of the bed and the soil to continue to decompose down below. Not only that, but the sharp edges of the wood chips really don't feel too good on your fingers when you're digging, and then they also can damage the potatoes as you're unburying them. With potatoes, you may have heard that you need to continually be covering the base of the potatoes with more mulch so they can produce additional roots and potatoes in that mulch, or if you're not using mulch, to cover the base with soil. But that's not absolutely necessary. You don't have to cover them at all to get a good crop of potatoes. However, if you look at the base of your potato plants and you notice there's a potato developing like that underground and it's sticking out a little bit, you definitely want to cover that one up as best you can, because if they get exposure to the sun, they're going to have a little green spot on them that's not going to be good to eat and could even be a little bit toxic to consume. If you're worried about the grass clippings getting too stagnant, or you want to try a different option, you can always use straw. That would be a great option to layer on top of grass, and actually would probably be more ideal because you don't have to be worried about the depth of that mulch layer, and it would actually probably be more ideal because you wouldn't have to worry about the depth of that mulch layer. But I had great success with grass clippings, so it might be fun to experiment with both. The cool thing about potatoes and the plants that create those potatoes underground, well, up top they create this amazing looking flower. It almost has an exotic look to it, and this flower will turn into a little berry about the size of a cherry tomato, and that's not edible. But once the flower turns into a little berry and then everything starts to die off, about a couple weeks after that is a good time to harvest the potatoes. And you can leave them in the ground for a little while after that, and they'll kind of store in the ground, but you don't want to leave them too long because then they could start to rot or get consumed by other animals, so I've heard. But actually, on second thought, I left those potatoes in my wood chip bed in the ground and they still came up. So who knows how true that actually is. Gardening doesn't have to be hugely expensive. You don't have to spend tons of money on soil and compost and mulch and all this stuff. A lot of people would think to create a massive bed like this, you're gonna need to put down layers and layers of compost. But look, that is not the case. I did not do that at all here, and I have a beautiful, thriving garden. You just need to be a little bit strategic with what you're planting. So you need to plant things in a first-year bed that you're covering with mulch that will come up really easily through that mulch, such as these potatoes and these Jerusalem artichokes, which you bury under the ground. It's kind of similar process to a potato, and it will come up just like these potato plants have. So any kind of crops that you bury as a little tuber that can then shoot their way up through mulch and are really good and aggressive at doing that job, those are really good crops to start a new first-year bed on grass if you want to convert more of your lawn. Potatoes have been probably one of the easiest things I've ever grown. I don't even water them here in the climate in the Midwest where I'm at, and they just grow amazingly. So highly recommend, give it a try.